Welcome, everyone. I am Bob Wurzelbacher, the director of the Respect Life Office for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and this is our video podcast series that we call Being Pro-Life. Each month, we discuss a different topic in the Respect Life arena. We'll hear a personal story from someone deeply affected by that issue. And finally, we'll share ways that you can get involved. This month's topic is the beautiful gift of adoption. And as always, we have special guests. Will you please introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Billy Gardner.
I'm Maura Gardner.
We are a couple living in Columbus, actually, who have adopted two kids. We have a 3, almost 4-year-old, and then a 1-year-old.
Let's start by sharing your story. Why did you decide to adopt?
So I think for us, really ever since the beginning of our time together as a couple, we knew that we were called to parenthood. We both are very close with our families, loved growing those relationships as a family. And we really felt called as a couple. And then once we got married, definitely as a married couple, to enter into that vocation of parenthood. And so when we got married, we right away started kind of trying to have kids. And it wasn't until we've been trying for, I would say, about 6 months to a year-ish that we started to kind of get this sense that there was something not right. Something just wasn't happening the way that we had hoped it would. We weren't having kids. So we ended up going through probably about a year or so of then treatments for that, trying various things. We both had various surgeries and worked with specialists, and ended up eventually after that time coming to the conclusion that it was just not going to be biologically a thing for us to be able to have kids. And so that was obviously really hard for us because we still felt that call to parenthood. And we were starting to see a lot of our friends and whatnot starting to have kids all along. Kind of interestingly, we both had, and we'd even when we were dating, talked about that adoption might be a path to parenthood for us, that we had thrown out the idea of maybe choosing to adopt children maybe after we'd had a couple of our own. That was just kind of something that we had talked about without knowing that it might be something that would be the option for us. So looking back, I see that the hand of God kind of in that, kind of guiding our hearts to be open to the idea of adoption, right? Kind of from early on in our relationship. So then when we went through that difficulty of dealing with infertility and kind of found that we weren't going to be able to grow our family that way, it very naturally led into, okay, well, seems like adoption is not going to be a path to parenthood for us. It's going to be the path to parenthood for us. So it's kind of a beautiful thing to kind of see how God was preparing our hearts from the beginning. So from that time, we then ended up finding an attorney here in Columbus where we live. And that kind of set us on the path to then what led us to adopt our first daughter, who is now going to be 4 this June.
So Billy and Maura, so you're already talking about it, you said, when you were dating. Did you grow up, did you know people who were adopted in your family or friends or anything? What brought that, do you think, in your mind in the first place?
So I know that I'd had some kind of family friends, extended family that had been adopted, but no one no sibling or direct cousin of mine. But it was just for some reason, something that I'd always been fascinated by, the whole concept of adoption. This probably sounds really silly, but looking back at watching the movie Annie, I just always was into this whole idea of adoption. And as a child in elementary school, they'd make you write stories and, creative writing. And that was often a topic of things I would write, would be about either orphans or just kids being adopted. And I honestly don't really know what exactly prompted that. I think it was just something that I knew it was always going to be something in my life. But when Billy and I had been dating, he did let me know that he has an uncle that had fertility issues and that he has a couple of cousins that were adopted. So we kind of also, I think, had that discussion pretty early on in our relationship of before Billy had any testing or I had any testing. We kind of knew, some things pass through family. What if for some reason we're not able to have any biological children? And so it was always kind of just knowing that that was a route to parenthood. It was never a totally foreign concept for us, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've been around it my whole life because my uncle and his wife weren't able to conceive biological children of their own. So they have 2 adoptive children. So I just grew up knowing that my cousins, 2 of them, were adopted. And I just remember how it was just so normal. It was just part of our growing up years to have that. And so I just remember thinking, wow, what a beautiful thing that they were able to grow their family in that different way. And so that was always kind of in the back of my mind. Another thing that just, when you're talking about like the history of adoption and when you're around it, I always just, what sticks in my brain is my parents growing up were always very strongly pro-life. And they they had these bumper stickers that they put on their cars and then made us put on our cars. When we got cars that always said adoption.
Made us put on our cars.
So I just always in my head, that's what always followed up adoption was a loving choice. So I think it was just, again, from the beginning, kind of God preparing my heart for what was going to happen when we eventually chose adoption as the route to grow our family.
The Holy Spirit was sprinkling in life experiences to prepare you for this. So you decided, okay, it looks like adoption is going to be the path to parenthood here. Did you turn then to your uncle, to people who you knew for the first, what is the process? What is, to answer your questions? Or did you go to you went to a lawyer first? What was the first place you turned?
So we reached out to various people that we knew who had adopted. There was a woman that I used to work with at a restaurant I was a waitress at that I knew she in recent years had adopted a child, because it seemed like so many things have changed over the years in terms of adoption. We were kind of, any people that we knew more directly were mostly like, oh, but their kids are grown and things are so different now. So I had reached out to this woman knowing that she had recently adopted, and I went just on a coffee date with her one day, just kind of picking her brain, trying to get some information from her. And then Billy, he's a teacher and he had some kids he knew of that had been adopted, and he reached out to their parents just to kind of get some information. I did a lot of Googling things, reading up reviews of different agencies, I'm kind of a information gatherer type of person. So I put like a little Word document where I was kind of putting like, okay, these people recommended this agency. Here's some potential costs with this one versus this one. Here's, whatever. And then we kind of sat down, absorbed it all, and really prayed about it, just kind of trying to see what felt right. And the lawyer we reached out to was one that the woman I had met with had eventually gone with. She had kind of tried with some different agencies as well. But with going the just adoption lawyer route, they're very big on you just advertising yourself. They sometimes encounter birth parents they'll meet with. So we put together a profile book we gave to him. But that's one difference with the agencies that we found, was that the agencies have a lot more connections to birth parents. So they kind of are meeting with a lot of birth parents more frequently versus the lawyer that sometimes just waits for them to come to them. So they really push you, advertise yourself. And so we kind of made a website that was similar to our profile book, posted on Facebook. We reached out to family and friends, made some little cards that they could hand out that linked to our website, saying like, help us grow our family through adoption, put them in contact with the lawyer, whoever. And then it's kind of a roundabout way we ended up getting to our first daughter, because I have an aunt in South Carolina who had a friend who said, hey, I saw your niece is looking to adopt. We adopted through this adoption group that's in California. So here they are in South Carolina, but adopted through this agency in California. So I reached out to them, and most agencies make you pay a fee before they'll show your profile. But these people looked at our profile and said that we seemed different enough to them, it seemed, from other couples they've been working with, that it seemed like they were willing to show our profile. We actually, before sending them anything else, had already gotten information from them on some birth moms as potential matches. And then they reached out to us about one wanting to have a phone call with us. And we had kind of started the process like May, June, the 1 year, and this was now the following February. So we had a lot of waiting, just hearing nothing, and you kind of are devastated thinking, am I ever going to be a parent? Like, I've wanted this for so long. Is it ever going to happen? It's hard waiting for sure, especially after going through all the infertility before even starting the adoption process. You just get anxious and you want it to happen right away. And we had a call with a birth mom that February, and she expressed interest in moving forward with us. So we kind of kept in touch off and on, then through texting, and also knew the lawyer here also still had our profile books too. So we were kind of just open to see what, if someone else expressed interest, just knowing that things can always fall through. And then we actually had an adoption fundraiser set up to help us raise costs, to help cover all the costs that May. And shortly before that, we had not heard from this birth mom. Like, she hadn't responded to some text messages, and the agency people in California reached out directly and found that she had kind of just gone MIA and was debating whether to parent or move forward with adoption, kind of leaning more toward choosing to parent the child, but seemed still very unsure about everything. And so we kind of took that step back on, okay, we kind of had our hearts in this, but, it's her choice. And, what do we do? What's right? And the baby wasn't due yet, still for a few more months. And we had already booked a flight to go out to California to try to meet with her in person because we'd only talked over the phone. The agency kind of recommended, it's different to kind of get to know someone a little bit more in person. So we then had this thought of, we have plane tickets to go visit this person. And now she's hesitant. She's feeling like she doesn't want us. Do we still go out there? It's a lot of money to fly out there. Do we instead say maybe that's a sign this isn't meant to be and stay home, save that money for, a potential other match down the road? And we didn't tell any of our family and friends that we could potentially have had this match fallen through because it was right before our fundraiser. And it's a lot of attention you get on you. You're afraid to have to explain things. And I don't know, we're here. We told you we thought we had a baby. Now we don't know. And it's a lot of mixed emotions wrapped into things. So we really had just talked to each other and prayed about it and felt that there was a reason we were still supposed to go on this trip. So it was booked for just a long weekend, thinking we would go meet with this birth mom. And we still weren't hearing back from her, and neither was the agency. So we met at the agency in California. And this was now like the beginning of June was when we were out there. We were in their office and they were kind of talking to us about, hey, here's some other potential situations in terms of what are you open to, characteristic wise of kids, how many kids, what age, things, just trying to get more information from us they were kind of feeling like that other match is not going to go through. You guys need to be open to other situations. So we were sitting there just having that conversation with them, and their phone rang, and it's a husband-wife pair out there. And so the wife went to answer the phone while the husband was talking with us, and just hearing their end of the conversation, our hearts start racing. We're sitting there because we're like, she's saying something about a baby. There's a baby that needs parents. And she got off the phone and said, I don't know if you guys would be interested because you only packed for a long weekend. You live in Ohio, but a baby was born a day prior, and there was some drug use that was showing up at the hospital, and state law, the foster care system was trying to step in and take the child. But birth mom actually had been adopted from foster care herself. She wanted the child to be adopted. And the biggest difference, I think, that we didn't even really think a lot about until we started the adoption process was that with the adoption, the birth parents really get to choose who the child goes to, right? Versus with foster care, where she would have had no say who the child went to, limitations more in contact and such. So she had a friend with her at the hospital who said, I need to call my lawyer. She didn't have a lawyer yet. She told us this after. She said, we just knew we needed to find something. So they went out, her friend kind of Googled adoption stuff, happened to come across this agency's phone number, and that's why they made this call. And they had a time limit on needing to make a match so that the child would not go just into the custody of the state. So we said, you know what? This must be why we're here. This is why we flew out here. We knew God had a plan. We didn't know this was it. This is kind of crazy. Like, all of our parents are thinking we're still coming home in 2 days. Wow. So we hopped in the car. They told us a lawyer who was also about 4.5 hours away, the opposite direction of California, was going to meet us at the hospital along with the birth mom, who she had also never met before. The whole drive there, she was sending the birth mom a link to our profile so that the birth mom would already kind of have an idea about us and decide, hey, yes, I want to meet them, or no. So she still had a choice in the process. When we were walking up to meet her in the hospital, so we knew what she looked like, the lawyer sent us a picture. So we saw this girl and we're kind of like, I think that's her. She had already left the hospital. The baby had actually been born when we were flying there. So it was one of those things that we're like, baby was born as we were in flight. We were in the air. So we sat there, we saw this girl start walking toward us. Her eyes and my eyes kind of locked, and we were like, okay, this is it. We're meeting. Like, you feel like it's this awkward first date almost. And we went to a room, sat down with the lawyer, birth mom, and her friend, and just kind of chatted, learned more about her. She was looking through more of our profile at the time. And then at one point, she and her friend kind of looked at each other and just kind of laughed. And then they looked at us and said, hey, just so you know, we kind of had a secret sign we were going to give each other if we got here and didn't like you, to kind of have an out. Like they kind of had a plan.
Right.
Like, hey, you say this if you don't like me. They're like, but we like you. And the birth mom said she literally looked at Billy and said, no offense to you, but as soon as I locked eyes with Maura, I knew that is meant. I'm sorry, I'm going to get teary when I say this because it was just
it's all about Maura.
Where she even said, she's like, I looked at you and we locked eyes and I thought this is going to be my daughter's mom. And I had a necklace on that was just this little infinity symbol that I have a twin sister. She had given me that necklace before. And birth mom looked and she said, I have one of those necklaces. She had a son that was not in her custody at the time either. And he had gotten her a similar necklace before. And she's like, something about that and the look on your face when we locked eyes, she just knew. But unfortunately, with the way the law was there, even birth mom saying at this point she wanted us, it was a Sunday and all the offices were closed. And the lawyer said, we need to wait till tomorrow to even find out if the state's going to back off. Because even at that moment, they could have just put the baby into foster care, even though the birth mom was saying she wanted us. So it was still very unclear, unsure, but birth mom offered us both wristbands to go see the baby in the NICU. She kind of took each of us up individually to meet the baby. And then she offered us her wristband, which she didn't have to. And that really meant a lot to us. The baby ended up being in the NICU for 2 weeks, but she wanted us to have that time to bond. So even though things weren't signed over yet, she thought that was important for us to have that time to bond with now our daughter. And it was just a really special moment because she took me up first because only 2 people were allowed in there at a time. So our daughter was then 2 days old at this point. And she kind of put her arm around me, put her arm on our daughter and said, this is your mom, and pointed at me. And I'm looking at her thinking, no, you're her mom. Like, is this okay? Can you say that? And it was a very powerful moment because I think it really spoke to that whole, she was choosing to have me be the mom. And we still tell our daughter that now, we still keep in touch with her. We video chatted on Facebook with her about a month ago. So that they could talk. And our daughter knows she grew in this mom's belly, and then that mom chose to give her to us to be her mom and dad too. But there was just little things along the way that was it was a whirlwind. Like I said, we were devastated when we found out that first match may have fallen through. It was just a lot of total trust flying out there when we felt, should we be saving this money instead? And when we met the lawyer at the hospital, we were sitting there when birth mom went to go to the bathroom or something. And she was just looking at us and sharing more about herself. And she told us she was a convert to Catholicism, that she had prayed outside of abortion clinics as not a Catholic and saw people handing birth moms rosaries. She knew what a rosary was, but she said they didn't even say anything about it being a rosary. They would just say, this is for you, and just offer it to birth moms. And she thought that was kind of neat, that she felt, it didn't feel pushy. It just felt like just to show them a sign of something homemade and to show that they cared. So she started making rosaries, still not Catholic. And she then started turning more toward the Catholic faith and decided to convert. And she had a rosary with her that she said she had on hand just to give to a birth parent or adoptive couple. And she pulled it out and it was pink. And this baby happened to be a little girl then, and it had a St. Patrick medal on it. She said she always picks a different saint to put the medal on. We're parishioners at St. Patrick Church. And so we were sitting there looking at that and we thought, this is a sign to us too of like, God had his hands in this. And the birth mom and I say off and on to each other too, just that whole, how amazing God is that he chose to bring us all together in that way that didn't make sense to us at the time. We're like, why are we flying out here? Why are we driving now 4.5 hours to meet someone who may hate us, might think we're crazy? Like, we still might go home childless. And it was just those other signs of, okay, God's here. He's with us. I don't know. It was just a crazy mix of emotions that all ended up with our daughter.
That is an incredible story. I love all of those pieces. Oh my gosh, all those God moments. What an incredible story. So how long did you stay out there in California then before you actually flew home with your daughter?
So we flew there on a Saturday. We had tickets to fly home on Wednesday, and we met the birth mom on Sunday, met our daughter first, then on Monday. And even then it was, okay, things aren't signed. We don't know what's going on. I have an uncle that lives in California, so we were very blessed to have family out there. But he was the, 4.5 hours away. So we booked a hotel room near the hospital, and then the hospital actually had a home that is supported through donations for parents who need to stay close to the hospital if they have a sick child. So the social worker at the hospital helped us then be able to stay in this home that was just a couple blocks away from the hospital while she was in the NICU. So she was in the NICU for 2 weeks. Then we were allowed to take her to my uncle's, but we weren't allowed to leave the state. So there's a bunch of paperwork that's required for interstate adoptions before they'll even let you cross state lines. So then we were in California for about a month before we were allowed to come home to Ohio.
She was in the NICU for drug issues?
The birth mom hadn't had any prenatal care. She had actually thought that it was a premature birth, but because of the baby's size at birth, they estimated her as full term. And then as she was in the NICU, she had breathing issues at first, and then she had issues feeding. She was on a feeding tube for a couple weeks. Luckily, she had no signs of withdrawal. So she did test positive for some drugs in her system, but she didn't have any signs of withdrawal. So the neonatologist there kind of told us, I think it's more just that maybe she actually was a preemie. They just didn't really have an actual due date to know. But we were very lucky in that she overall has been pretty healthy.
Yeah. So you were in California for a month. What was your job situations? How were you able to do that?
I was very lucky in that I work as a teacher. So this happened to fall right. All of this just kind of came right at the beginning of my summer break that year. So I just come out of my first year of teaching. And so I was very lucky in that I didn't have to take any time off of work. And Maura.
Yeah. So I'm a physical therapist in a nursing home. So I work full time, but I had told, my bosses knew that we were working, trying to adopt, and we had kind of told them I'd filed the paperwork for family medical leave. So it's unpaid time off, but it qualifies to then be off for up to 3 months. So I'd filed all that paperwork kind of right before we ever had a match. We were just kind of I don't know what date to put down. I don't know when I'll have a kid, but just know I will at some point. So my boss was one of the first to know, because I said, I know you expected me at work on Thursday. I won't be at work on Thursday, but don't tell anyone why, because I don't really know if I'm going to have a kid. And so it was funny because when I came back, even she was good. She didn't tell anyone. So everyone else at work was like, where's Maura? I thought she was coming back, but we just didn't want to kind of have it be a broadcasted thing until we knew for sure. But I was very blessed that they were very good at working with me on all the uncertainties.
What an incredible story. You have a second child. So let's go to before you decided, okay, we want to do a second one. And what route did you take that time?
We kind of always knew from the get-go, when we knew that we wanted to be parents, we knew that we wanted to have multiple children. We kind of always looked at it however many children God wants us to have, that's how many children we have. So we knew after everything had kind of settled down, we had finalized adoption of our older child. She was probably about almost 2 years old when we really started to look at the process again and think about, but we just thought that would seem to be a good sort of gap. So we wanted to wait until we felt like we were in a good place financially to adopt.
And not just that, but also just have some time of less stress and just enjoy being parents. The adoption process is long and hard in terms of how many requirements you have to go through to be approved to adopt.
Yeah.
And then with our first daughter, it was about 9 months after she was born that it was finalized. So that whole next 9 months we were having, since it was out of state, we had social worker visits in Ohio, and then we had phone call visits with a social worker in California. And it seemed like nonstop that it felt like it was kind of taken away from time that we were just trying to enjoy being new parents. And so we kind of wanted, okay, before we start all this all over again, let's take time to just enjoy being parents.
And so we had decided we would try a slightly different route. We ended up choosing to work with an agency the second time through. And it was kind of the same sort of thing that Maura did a lot of information gathering. She's an information gatherer for sure. And so we had the same we used some of the information we had from before, but we did some more searching, and we ended up connecting with an agency here in Ohio that only works with adoptive families and with birth parents here in Ohio. So we thought that might simplify the process, at least in some extent, because then we're only working with maybe a car drive instead of a 6-hour plane ride. That might also allow us, we had hoped, to have more of a connection, a close connection with the birth family. So we ended up working with an agency the second time through, which was just kind of a different experience. And I think I really appreciated all of what the agency brought to the table, because they just brought all of this experience, and they kind of, where before we felt like there were times where we might get surprised with something, like we didn't know that something was coming along and we suddenly needed this class or we needed this paperwork done. It was like all along the agency was so helpful and supportive of, okay, now you need this and here's when you need to have it by. And they helped us through the process in that way. So it was about, we started with that agency. It was going to be about July of 2019, and kind of got approved then to adopt again in September of 2019. And it was then December of 2019 that we ended up getting matched with a birth mother here in Ohio. And so we got to meet the birth mother in person right away. We went to a restaurant and we were able to sit down with her and the social worker and have more of that personal connection, which was really special. And then because she was going to appointments here in Ohio, she had said that she wanted to have us in on the process. So Maura got to go to an ultrasound appointment with her, which was
and I actually got to meet the birth father.
Yeah.
So our first daughter, we know nothing about the birth father. She said unknown, but this time around, the birth mom said I could take her to some appointments. And like I said, my work was wonderful at letting me have some like half days of work to be able to go on the drive. She didn't live in the same part of Ohio as us. So it was a drive. So I had to drive and picked her up and took her to appointments. And one of the appointments I took her to, I was like a couple blocks away from picking her up. And she said, hey, birth father's with me too. He wants to meet you. So I didn't have much time to mentally prepare for that. We knew that she knew who the birth father was, but I didn't know that I would get to meet him. So that was actually really nice. It was just me and both the birth parents just kind of met at a coffee shop. Then before the appointment, got to know him as well. So that was really special and something that we, didn't get to do with the first time around. But then we did then both take her to one of the anatomy ultrasounds. So that was actually really special for us to experience something that regular parents, like birth parents and biological parents, get to experience. So that was really unique. But it was soon after the ultrasound appointment that we both attended with the birth mom that we actually lost contact with her as well. And she stopped responding to some messages. So we had a roller coaster both times around. We were kind of again at a loss, and our agency said that we had a choice. We could keep our profile like kind of offline, like not being shown to anyone else, to just kind of wait and see whether this birth mom did choose to parent or if she reached back out again. So we talked about it and said, you know what, go ahead and put our profile live again. And we will just trust that if this is meant to be our child, we'll hear from birth mom again. And if it's not, then we'll hear from someone else. It was then a week and a half before she had a scheduled C-section. And about a week and a half before the C-section date, she called our social worker and asked her to get back in touch with us. And so we had very short notice then at that point again, but it was one of those that was just this excitement all of a sudden then of, okay, like she's back on board, we're doing this. And especially knowing it was, a baby that we had seen the ultrasound for, we'd been there for all of that. We gave birth mom a ride to the hospital, and then birth father ended up coming to the hospital as well. And they gave us a room at the hospital next door. So we got to be at the hospital with the baby and with both birth parents as well.
I think through it all, especially the second time around, we just had this, even more so than the first time, we had this piece of like, well, it's out of our hands and that's okay. Like we knew that God had a plan in it all, and we didn't know how it was going to work out. We didn't know that we were going to find out a week and a half before the birth of our youngest daughter, but there was just kind of that beauty and like trusting in God's plan.
So you have an open relationship with the birth mom and the birth dad?
We had been keeping up contact and sending pictures. We had messaged back and forth on our phones and on Facebook, but her birth mother actually sadly passed away back in the fall. So right before the adoption finalized, birth mom passed away. But when we were at the hospital, birth mom had put us in contact with some of her extended family, some siblings of our daughter as well. And so we have kept in touch with some of the extended family as well. We were very happy that she had already kind of started that bridge to some of the extended family so that we're able to have a continued connection with the family.
Well, I was going to ask about that since she had placed before. So the other adopted sibling?
She had some other children that she did not place for adoption. So we have contact with them. And then the social worker did give us contact information for the other adoptive couple as well. Kind of one of those things that with the open adoptions, we feel like it's just more that further, look how many amazing people there are to love our kid. That it's just because we've had a lot of people look at us, people that we say we're adopting, and people go, oh, well, why would you want to keep it open? Are you afraid they'll come take the kid? Right. We're like, no, it's more like Billy and I both feel like it's, if anything to us, makes just more of that beautiful story of our kid to see all these people love you and your birth parents chose us. It wasn't like we came in and swooped up and took their kid, because some people look at adoption that way. And we're really trying to help educate people to the fact that it's not. It is, like you said, the bumper sticker said, what a loving choice, that, you know, these birth parents made this choice out of love for their child, and they met us, they chose us, and we've continued to, you know, to the best of our ability, keep in touch with them as well too, to just help our kids know your parents chose us to also be your parents because they loved you and they wanted this for you.
And knowing that, as you know, for the child to grow up knowing those stories and knowing that's very, very helpful for that child to know their story and know and feel that love and acceptance when they know the story of their birth parents and their birth family.
And our 3-year-old actually will tell anyone in the grocery store her whole life story. So everyone, I think, at the Meyer near us knows that she's adopted.
From California,
because she will say hi to anyone and she goes, I'm adopted. I'm from California. And this is my sister. She's adopted. She's from Ohio. So everyone knows, but it's cute. She's excited to share that. And I think, because that's something we've had people ask us too, are you going to tell them we're adopted? And I'm like, my children have known from day one that they're adopted. Yeah. And it's because it's just it's a part of their identity, but I look at it as just an awesome part of their identity, that it's just a part of their story. It's not something that they should be ashamed of or try to hide. It's something that they should be proud of, because it's, you know, part of makes them who they are.
Let's say we're talking to a couple who is thinking about adoption, but maybe a little bit afraid of a process, right? You have a message where you want to tell them about how you go through with that.
I would say that adoption is a process, and there are going to be parts of it that I think are going to be scary or seem intimidating, but I think something to keep in mind is there's always that strength to fall back on. I feel like it's something that brings you closer together as a couple to go through something like that, to really learn to lean on each other as a couple and to lean on prayer, to just, I would say, continue to trust that God has a reason. Like if you're feeling that call to adoption, that call comes from somewhere. I truly believe that the Holy Spirit moves in your heart to prepare you. And if you're feeling that call, there's a reason for that. And that God brings the strength that you need for the moment. It may not always feel like it in the moment, but then you'll be able to see, wow, I got through that. We were able to see that difficulty through. We were able to get through that piece of the journey that felt like it was going to be too hard. I think God gives you strength for the way, and has been so beautiful for us through the whole journey, has just been the way that not only does he give you strength, through working in your heart and working with you and your spouse, but just bringing up that support network. I think of our story of how we adopted Kiara and how all these people along the way, the lawyer in California that we'd never met before, Maura's relatives in California, all of our friends and family that were able to help us out, whether it was donating something or coming to help clean our home while we were away, all these things, just, it's so beautiful the way God raises up that support network to bring you through it. So I would just say, if you're at all fearful of that, it's just God will provide. He really will. It seems, I don't know, a trite thing to say, but I truly believe that. And I've seen it in all cases in our adoption story. It's God brings you strength for the journey.
It's worth it, because it's definitely, it's scary. It's hard, but it's worth it. I think that also, it's worth it, and it's hard on the adoptive end of things, but, also I know it's not easy on the birth parent side of things either. And just knowing that a very hard decision on both, ends at times, but that it is worth it. And that ultimately.
Can I ask you this? I get the impression, I think you suggested your children are somewhere around 3 and 1 right now. Is that right? Are you starting to think about number 3?
Yeah, we've talked about, that it's our agency lets you extend home study. So we did put to have an extend, and then we'll have to update it later this year. We'll kind of talk about that. We don't have like an exact time frame in mind yet, but we definitely are wanting to adopt again too.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing with us your story of your journey as someone who has adopted 2 children. I'm sure a lot of people hearing your story can see more fully about how beautiful adoption can be. And as you 2 said, trust in God, and it's worth it. So thanks for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you so much for having us on the show. We just really appreciate being able to share our journey and kind of share the love that's been with us through it all. So thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for tuning in this episode of our Being Pro-Life series. Head to the website to check out the video at www.catholicaoc.org/beingprolife. Thanks again for listening. I look forward to being with you next time.